to be able to acknowledge and say out loud, I'm sensing something is coming, is one of the most profoundly powerful things you can do. Rudy and I talk all the time. So it was probably multiple conversations where I would look at him and say, I have a sense. I sense something is changing. I sense that we might be moving. We are sensory beings. We are intuitive beings. We can sense into what is coming far before it shows up and materializes in front of our physical eyes.
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to one belief that you have the power within to create everything you seek. So if you are ready to step into a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with me. I'm your host, Rudi Riekstins, and this is the Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. You're joined today by Anniston and myself. And today we're going to be talking to you about alignment and how to live in alignment as a spiritual being, using life as your guiding fork, if you will, for when you need to return back to yourself, how to read the signs of resistance. And for so many people, they hear spiritual terms like you've got to live in a state of flow, you've got to be in ease, don't force, don't push. But how does that actually work in real life? And so today, we want to literally unpack that for you so that you can fall back into a state of ease and flow.
I'm so excited about this conversation because not only do I think we're in a time where we've said this before this year, it's not enough to know anymore. You really have to know how. And the more that we can show up and share our how, not to say it's the only how, but our how to remain in alignment and to not collapse under the pressure of uncertainty and to trust our intuition enough that we can feel our way forward in times of making huge life altering major decisions, I think is one of the greatest gifts we can give to you.
You know, Annis and I are in the process of moving to Montana. We are picking up our lives and we're moving from a place that we've openly spoken about always wanting to live because we just love Wilmington. In fact, we wanted to move here long before either of us had ever even been. And so for people to hear that we're packing up our lives and we're relocating and we're moving our kids from a beautiful neighborhood where they've got 20, 30 kids within a stone's throw of where we are, and to move to a place that neither of us have ever really been or spent any time. I've been now just for a very short amount of time, and we went looking for property, but we'd already made the commitment to move. That from the outside looking in, it sounds absolutely crazy. My mother was having a conversation with me this weekend. Aniston had a conversation with her mother this weekend, and both of them had interesting takes on us, on our lives, and watching us from a distance. And I think this is a great way to set up this conversation. I want to share the conversation that I had with my mom and what really was so powerful about her vantage point of this, because we're so close to what we're doing that we don't always see what it looks like from the outside looking in. And then, Anderson, I'd love for you to share the conversation that you had with your mom. My mother had called in as a check-in on Sunday, and she was asking, like, how is it going? You've got a couple of weeks and you're going to be there. And I was like, well, I'm doing this and I've got this to do. And then I've got to take care of that. And then she just paused for a moment and she said to me, I just want to really commend you and your wife and watching you from a distance, what that looks like. And to see how the two of you constantly are going with the flow of what life is. And then she said to me, you've been speaking into this now for over a year. And I paused and I was like, what do you mean? Because we've only decided recently that we're making this move. And she said, no, no. When I was with you a year ago, you said to me, oh, I need to tackle this room in preparation for our move. And I remembered you saying that because I still thought, where are you moving? Like you've only ever wanted to be in Wilmington. And I turned to her in that moment and I'd said to her, oh, yeah, we're feeling the pull. We're feeling like it's somewhere. We just don't know where it is yet. And then I just carried on with my everyday, but she remembered that. And so she's been quietly in the background waiting. And so when we decided we were making this move, it was obvious to her that something was coming, but it was really just more about where we were going.
Yeah, when I spoke to my mom this weekend, what she said was, and it was my father was actually on the phone too, and she said, Anniston, she's like, sometimes I feel like watching you and Rudy and how you live your lives is like my favorite movie where I'm like on the edge of my seat watching this narrative unfold and these characters living in a way that is so extraordinary in terms of what the ordinary, I guess, what would be expected and what would be comfortable and what would be normal. And yet you do it and you do it so gracefully and it always seems to work out. You guys always seem to land your butt in the butter as we say, and I think that it's interesting from her take as well because she's seen me for sure. And then ever since marrying Rudy, I mean, long before I married Rudy, I had many moments in my life where I would sense something was changing. And then I would get this harebrained idea like, I don't know, I'm going to go work on a cruise ship, even though I had never stepped foot on one. I had no idea if I would like that or not, if I would be perpetually seasick. I had no clue. But if I felt it so strongly and I trusted it, and it wound up leading me to a career, to my husband, to some of the just the most exciting, best years of my life. And it fundamentally shifted the direction of my life. And we have these moments, I think, that we have a choice to follow the road less traveled. And Rudy and I have really, I would say, we are always evolving and learning and growing, but we've really perfected the art of this.
I would love for you to get into today's conversation for the benefit of our audience and to speak into what does it look like for us to live in flow. I think that anybody that has been following the podcast for a while now or knows us knows that we're constantly in a state of growth and change, and we don't really hold ourselves down to something that was. We're always open to something becoming what it needs to become. But I set the foundation that today's episode, we're going to be speaking into what is flow
Mhm.
and how to live a life in a state of flow. And I want to really speak into what does that mean to be in flow? And then I also want to speak into how do you recognize when you're not in flow so that as the audience, they can follow along saying, oh my gosh, wow, really, I am in flow. I didn't realize that that's how I am. Or, oh my gosh, they've just so beautifully spoken into how I'm resisting and what would it look like to be able to make that transition.
Yeah. Well, where I'm being guided to start is I think to be in flow is to constantly be trusting more what you're feeling than what you're thinking. And flow is something that you tap into as a symptom of and an effect of being in alignment. And for me, when I'm in alignment, I feel this deep sense of satisfaction. I wouldn't even say that it's this like heightened high all the time. It's more of this, even though I can be working hard and there could be challenges, there's still this overriding sense of this is still exactly where I need to be. And I'm still gaining and I'm still growing. And in the example that we're using today, which is around this move, last year, I would say maybe halfway through the year, I distinctly remember having a conversation with Rudy, and Rudy and I talk all the time. So it was probably multiple conversations where I would look at him and say, I have a sense. I sense something is changing. I sense that we might be moving. I couldn't tell you why I sensed that. I just did. It was like a knowing, but it didn't come with all the information. Where it starts is, and I think this is important for anyone listening, I want you to pay attention to this because what can happen is when we're gripping our life too tightly and we're not open to the natural evolution of our path, that sometimes what can be a sensing of change we can perceive actually of being out of alignment when in reality all we're doing is we're sensing into something that's coming because we are sensory beings, we are intuitive beings, and science is even catching up with this. Is not just woo, like we sense. We can sense into what is coming far before it shows up and materializes in front of our physical eyes. And Rudy and I have practiced this throughout our marriage and trusting when we start to sense. So I think it's a good place to start is explaining what that feels like because to be able to acknowledge and say out loud, I'm sensing something is coming is one of the most profoundly powerful things you can do.
One of the first episodes we recorded was really our love story. And I love that in that love story, it started with me calling my brother saying, I am sensing I'm
Yeah.
gonna meet my wife. And I mean, I could feel it. I just knew you were coming, and I had no evidence to say to me that this was happening in my real world, but I felt it. I felt it so strongly, and remember calling him saying that, "Oh my gosh, I just feel like she's coming. I feel it in my bones," and him looking at me like I'm crazy.
Well, and it's interesting because we don't have a language for these things. We weren't gifted words, like, to be able to explain and articulate how we're experiencing energy and how we're experiencing, I mean, other than unless you identify as I'm a psychic or I'm a this. And but yet we all have access to this information. So when someone said, "Oh my gosh, this came out of the blue. It was totally unexpected." I don't know. I think that when you're tuned in and you're tapped in and you are feeling into what's going on and you can decipher what's your energy versus what you're just sensing into, I think there's an enormous amount of information there. And I don't think there should be any massive surprises because if you're really honest with yourself, even if you think back to maybe one of the biggest surprises like life threw at you that you just didn't see coming, and I want you to really think about it and think about what was happening before then and think about, were you sensing anything? Did you have this underlying sense that something was going on? And so Rudy and I last year, we started having conversations and he actually said, "You know what? I'm sensing it too." And to me, what sensing felt like, it almost felt like a shift was happening internally with Rudy and I both. We'd gone through a lot of growth and change. Our habits were changing, meaning like some of the ways that we were wanting to spend our time was changing. Whereas we used to always want to be on the water and every weekend be out on our boat. And that was like the center of our universe with our kids. And that really created a lot of the joy that we got out of living here. That started to shift. And we started choosing other ways to spend our time. And someone could look at that and think, well, that's a waste. And you've got this boat sitting in your driveway, and that was your dream. But we were just going with what was genuinely bringing us joy. And so we started noticing our desires were changing. And then we started noticing our dream was changing. Whereas for a long time, we would dream of having this gorgeous oceanfront home. All of a sudden, we started being really drawn to land, to privacy, to quiet, to nature, to the mountains. That was a massive shift for Rudy and I because for so long it had always been about living near the water and living near the ocean. So all of these things were happening without us consciously, like, that wasn't a conscious intention. We were just observing this, and I think that's where you start is it's sensing and it's observing.
So there's a few things I want to touch on that Anniston just mentioned. One was we had a couple that we know come over for dinner one evening, and it was a Sunday, and we spent about 4 hours with them. And at the end of dinner, Anniston turned to me and she was like, "That was weird. Did you feel that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like counting down the minutes for this evening to come to a close. And it's not because we didn't care for the couple that came over for dinner. Obviously, we did because we invited them to come to our home. But we could sense something was very, very off between the two of them. And it was like molasses. It was thick. It was palpable. And we had discussed it afterwards lovingly, not in a judgment, but just saying, like, wow, we have a lot of compassion for them because we think they must be going through something really intense. And they never mentioned it. They didn't bring it up. And it wasn't our place to poke and pry. But about 3 months later, one of them in conversation with us shared that they had separated and was going through the process of a divorce. And in talking to them, they had divulged that it came as an absolute surprise. There was just no way on earth that they could have predicted that this was happening. And yet we could sense it in that moment. And when Aniston says, when you know, you just either choosing to pay attention or you're not choosing to pay attention. And I use that example, which will trigger many, many, many people, especially if you were caught off guard. But if you have a moment of honesty with yourself, whether you've lost your job or whether you lose a relationship or whether something comes up, even if it's a diagnosis, you're getting warning signs along the way. You're just choosing to pay attention to them. And sometimes they're not physical warning signs. Sometimes they're just that intuitive nudge. Something is wrong, something is off. And we have learned to lean into and to start to trust what that feels like when something is coming through our senses. I've used this example on the podcast, and I love to repeat stories because I think people need information in forms of layering. But we can only see, smell, and touch and feel so much. Whereas if we just look at the color spectrum, there is an entire color range that we cannot even see as human beings, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There are stories, countless stories of animals saving human beings, dogs all of a sudden dragging somebody off the front porch before the roof falls down, dogs pulling people out of buildings before a bomb goes off. There's these stories where they sense into something that's going to happen into the future, and this is documented, it is recorded, and it is truly powerful. And so, if they're able to lean into information that we can't perceive and inadvertently save somebody from a trauma, then does that mean that that information exists somewhere outside of what we can understand or conceive? And if that's possible, could we start to pay attention to that information? And so today's episode is really about bringing information to you in a way that is going to make you curious and asking yourself to start to ask the question, what are you sensing about what is happening around you? And then can you, once you identify that you're sensing that there's a shift or a change, not immediately go to the default of, oh, no, no, panic, panic, panic. I've had friends call me and say, oh, I feel something's happening at work. I feel the shift. And they immediately go into fear, fight, or flight. They're in a panic state and they start to worry about their job. They worry about their well being. They worry about their income, their bonus. And what are they creating? Whereas every time Anis and I feel a shift, we automatically assume it's going to be better than what we have. We just fall into the state of like, oh, well, everything just gets better, everything improves. And so when we feel the sense or we feel the shift, we're looking at it with eagerness and excitement. But now it has our attention. So we start to pay attention to it. And I want to use the example of the move because it's one of the things that's prevalent in our lives right now. And it'll be an easy way for you to be able to follow along in the journey of going in a state of flow. So Anderson comes to me about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and says, I feel like we're detaching from the home. I feel like we're moving. And I was like, yeah, I kind of feel something shifting, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. If you had asked me, I probably wouldn't have said a move, but I felt the energy was changing. And then we started to look around us and we noticed when we were watching TV shows like Yellowstone, we would turn to each other and say, gosh, that really excites me. I think about the idea of us just having lots of land. And that was something that really appealed to us. And our next door neighbors moved out, and the younger people moved in with their dogs, and they were barking incessantly all day. And I would hear the dog barking, and would get irritated by the sound. And then I would think, gosh, I just want land. I want space. And these are my senses speaking into the physical and showing me where I'm going, what I want, and what it is that I want to do. And so I want to share a little bit about how do you start to pay attention to when you're forcing flow and when you're going with the flow. And I want you to think about swimming in a river. And if it was a fast moving body of water, you could either go down the stream and enjoy that ride on the river, so to speak, or you could swim up the stream. And far too many of us are swimming up the stream. Aniston and I decided we were going to move to Montana. And we picked this incredible place because we felt intuitively it's where we need to be. We then went to look at property. We then started looking at buying a house and then what would look like to buy land. And we have a very short time frame and we could not find what we wanted. So we started navigating the journey of renting a property. Anderson, I would love for you to share for the audience what was the journey of us finding a home and how did we fall into flow and be very specific because I think this is really going to help people ground how can they take that as an example of how to apply it into their lives of where are they maybe pushing through something that they wouldn't necessarily need to push through to avoid an unnecessary experience.
100%. And I actually want to go back to April 17th, which is when the very day we made the decision that we were going to list our house, because that's really where it had gone from being an idea, being something we had been talking about, and where we had spent the last several months really watching the signs and things like coming to us. Relationships started coming to Rudy of people who lived in Bozeman. Never happened before. My client roster was almost all women that live on the Rocky Mountain line. I mean, it was like all signs were pointing to that area. And so it was very validating, and we look for signs, and I think that's important. So then I remember it was the new moon because, I follow astrology and numerology. And we went to lunch, and we both were talking about it. And we said, we have to make a decision because being an indecision can start to really drain your energy. And what do we want? And we both acknowledged, like, this is what we want. So we decided, okay, well, let's start taking steps because we trust that if this isn't aligned for us or if this isn't aligned right now, we will hit resistance. There will be things that slow us down. And this is a relationship we have built with the creator, with the universe over time. That trust has been built by making these decisions and taking steps of faith. And so our trust is really high that we've been blocked enough times to know that we will be blocked if it is not meant for us. And that's always our prayer. If this is not meant for us, we are unattached. But if it is, help us to stay in the flow and make it easy. And that was our intention. So we call a realtor. She comes to the house 2 days later and she says, okay, this is great. Your house looks great. Within 2 weeks, it was listed. And I kid you not, within 24 hours, we had 3 offers over asking. And they were great offers. The offer that we accepted with incredible humans who made our lives very easy. And the whole process, yes, while it was a tremendous amount of work, felt easy. We go to Bozeman. We fly in with the intention of either finding a home to buy or making the decision that we were going to rent. And every home we walked into, we didn't just walk in with our mind, we walked in with our whole body. We would Rudy, I mean, this realtor, I'm sure was like, which she's awesome. I love her, but I'm sure she was laughing because we would literally walk in, look at each other and be like, not the house. Like, cause we were feeling before we were even processing how many bedrooms are in there. She's listing off all of these things and we've already made our decision because we know what it feels like. We know what a yes feels like in our body and what a nose feels like in our body. And so we saved a lot of time. And we wound up leaving there not disheartened because, oh my gosh, we didn't find a house. It was more of like, okay, now we know more what we want. And what we kept coming up against is we really feel called to land. That original intention is calling us to it just as much as we want it. And so we decided we're going to rent. Well, then comes the whole process of finding a rental. We would go onto Zillow and go onto Realtor. And there were plenty of options that were coming and new options that were coming every day. But for whatever reason, every time I would get on and I would look at these houses, which nothing was perceivably wrong with them, but I would literally have a guttural response of like, ugh. That sound would come out of my mouth. And that's my sign. That's my body's sign of like, nope, not for you. Nope, not for you. Or I would even feel a little sick, like a little like queasy thinking about or anxious thinking about moving forward with one of them. But we had set a deadline of June 2nd. We said, okay, we need to have a home locked down under contract for rent by this date because we're moving 30 days from then. Or we'll be leaving before, actually, not even 30 days, like 3 weeks from then. And so the date comes and we're looking at these homes again, having the same response for both Rudy and I, just feeling like this is not it. Like this doesn't feel it. Yet we had this human deadline that we'd put for ourselves, by the way, because to us that felt like the responsible thing to do would be to be under contract and just lower our expectations, just get into a home so we can find some land. But I turned to Rudy that day and I was like, I just can't do it. I cannot go against what my body is telling me. I'm just know too much. And he said, I'm the same. He's like, I'm with you. Let's just hold out and see what happens. So the next day, same thing, nothing. And then the next day, we both started to feel that pressure of like, what are we going to do? Is this aligned? Maybe this is our sign. Like there's a bit of a change or a shift. And so what I said to him, it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, you know what? I feel like I'm a little jittery. I'm restless. I can't stop thinking about this. Let's just like get into the pool and have some fun. Let's just cut out early. Let's get in the pool. We'll pour some non alcoholic beers and just like let loose and not think about it and have fun and laugh and listen to music. And that's what we did. So essentially, what we were doing is we were getting out of resistance and just being in joy. Right. Because we've learned that that's a really powerful maneuver when you are feeling like you're coming up against resistance and you don't know what to do. So we get in the pool, and about 2 hours later, as we're still in the pool having a grand old time, Rudy gets a call.
So my phone rings and I actually mute the call because I don't want to interrupt what we're doing. We're in the middle of a conversation. And as the updated phone software now takes a voice message and it runs the message across your screen so you can see who's calling. And I get a bunch of spam calls. But for some reason, I picked up the phone and I started to read the message that was coming up. And the message that came up was, "Hi, my name is," and I had literally just been introduced to this person the day before. And I was like, that's really weird that they're calling me. And so I took the call. Now, I want to give you some backstory. When Anniston says that we were feeling the pressure of needing to find a place to stay, it's because our moving van would be arriving in 2.5 weeks' time. And they keep asking us, what's the final destination address? And we're like, we don't know yet. Our friends and family are like, have you found a place yet? And we're like, not yet. And all logic and reason says, you've got two kids, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, two dogs. They're 15-year-old dogs. They want structure, they want stability. Your kids deserve structure and stability. Your moving company wants some stability. And we just like, well, we just don't know yet. And everyone's like, dude, you guys are way too relaxed and you're too casual about this. And I'm getting worried for you. And I have anxiety about your house and your life and what you're doing. And I need you to find a place to live and tell me that you have a place to live. I probably got 4 or 5 text messages that day alone from people that I know, friends, family, even some clients. And they were like, do you have a house yet? Do you have a, can you update me? Will you update me when you have people are worrying on our behalf? And so one of my friends in Montana actually follows up with me every 2 to 3 days. Have you found a house yet? You should buy my next door neighbor's house. Hey, I'm going to take a video of my next door neighbor's house so you could see it. And they're just trying to help me find a place. And they're coming from an incredible place of love. And I'm like, nope, don't like it, don't like it, don't know where to go, doesn't feel right. We're waiting for the right place. And then he calls me on a Sunday evening and says, you have to meet this friend of mine. He's got a rental property. It's exactly what you're looking for. And I think, oh my God, that's amazing. Yes, please introduce me. Thank you. So he connects us over text message. And the guy that he connects me to sends me a private message and he goes, man, I'm so sorry. I don't know why he connected us. I can't help you. I don't have anything to rent you. All of my properties are full. And so nice to meet you. Welcome to Montana in a couple of weeks. I hope you figure it out. Have a good life. And ends the conversation right there because he is somebody that has rental properties, manages them, but he had nothing available. Everything was under contract. He's the guy that called me the very next day. And when I saw his name come up on my screen, I was like, well, that's odd that he just told me the day before he didn't have anything, but he's calling me now. And we were in a place of absolute peace. And being in a state of absolute peace, I just took the call and he said to me, oh my God, you're never going to believe what happened. I literally just left right now one of my properties and we have to evict these people because they're doing something that has broken or they're in breach of their agreement. And I think this is the house for you. And right there on the phone, Anniston and I both started nodding to each other. We hadn't seen any photos. We hadn't seen the specs of the house. We didn't know the number of bedrooms. We had no information. And we both started nodding. And I said to him on the phone, I was like, we really pay attention to when information is in flow. And I'm using that word now for the benefit of you, the audience, because this is what flow looks like in real time. We had resistance in all the properties that we wanted to get. We had put an offer down on a house that we wanted to buy. And then we were like, no, we don't know if we want it. So we decided not to buy the house. We had come up with resistance in what the loan could look like. And we just took that as a sign to back away. We then started committing to rentals. We couldn't find what we wanted again and again and again. We just couldn't find something that we felt energetically was aligned with us. And then we're out of options and no new properties are coming on the market. We check every day and nothing feels right. And we are at a crossroads now. Do we just settle and book anything so we have structure and stability? But something said, hold on, pause, pause, pause. And then my phone rings and a guy says, you'll never believe it. I have a property that literally just came on the market and I think your family's going to like it. And I said to him, I am 100% interested because this is coming to us. We're not coming to it. Can you send me a link of the photos? And on the call with him right there, I put it on speakerphone. He drops me the link. The two of us look at it and we're like, we'll take it. He hasn't told us how much it is yet. We haven't gone into any specifics, and we're like, yep, this is the one because it felt right. Now, yes, it needed to make financial sense. Yes, it needed to be in the right area. It needed to be in the right school system, but it was. It's literally hit all of the criteria of what it was that we were creating. Now, I want to bring you a little further into how we are able to live a life like this. Because every morning, Anis and I would wake up, and in our meditation, we would connect to the feeling of like, oh my God, this is perfect. This house is perfect. We would imagine in our minds having a view, no houses in front of us, seeing land, mountains, maybe water. And we would just connect to that feeling of like, this is the perfect landing spot. We are so grateful. This is better than we ever imagined. This is going to give our kids the perfect landing place for them to be acclimated into a new community, close to friends. And we're all going to just feel like this was the perfect spot. And we held the feeling of this was the perfect spot. So that when that call came in, when he started talking to us about the property, we energetically felt this is the one.
We have so many stories like this, you guys, and we've done a lot of podcast episodes. I have a good friend and a client who's like, I love you and Rudy's stories of your manifestation stories. And it always has this synchronistic element to it. And I do believe that when you start to, as Rudy said, create space in your life to feel and to sense and to allow your body to do what it was designed to do beyond just digestion and breathing and all of those things, which is to be a tuning fork, a guide for you that it allows you to not only get into flow, but to stay in flow. And from that place, what happens is synchronicity becomes your organizing principle of your life. What does that mean in simple terms? It means that you fully expect and anticipate synchronicity in all ways, all the time, and you constantly are in this marvel of life and how it all unfolds. And so, what we were experiencing in our bodies as this, ugh, like, no, wasn't a, this is not a no to moving to Montana. This was a, hey, not yet, not yet. Because the minute he got the call and we were presented with the opportunity for this home, I checked in with my body and I felt peace. I felt instant, instant relief, expansion, this like, yes. And so that is how yes feels like in my body. And what's amazing is like when you look at the house, you look at it and be like, well, that one doesn't look like overly special compared to the other ones. It wasn't about that. It was about the feeling. Because when you think about when you're navigating, especially into a transition that you have no idea, how do you know? How do we know that Bozeman is where we should be? Well, we know it because synchronicities have aligned so beautifully that and it's been a relatively easy, pain-free process. It's all flowing. So we know. And how long are we going to be there? We don't know. Is it going to be for a lifetime? Maybe. Is it going to be for a year? Maybe. But when you trust that you have this guidance system from within and that you trust in what it feels like to be in alignment, you don't need to know. You don't need to know because you know, as Rudy said, that everything is happening for us. It's all unfolding. And so you just become this active participant in the unfolding of your life. And I think that was the original design, to be honest. But we became so reliant on the mind, which can only pull from the past. So, what do you do when you're heading into a future where you don't have any idea? You have no experience. We've never lived in Bozeman. We've never lived in Montana. We don't know. Will we like it? Will we not? We don't know. But there's beauty in that too, because in the unknown, you can create magic. And the unknown, you can create anything. And so we just wanted to inspire you with this story. And I want you to think about what choice are you being asked to make right now? Or what area of your life are you fundamentally feeling that ugh about? And what would it look like for you to spend time by yourself, to get quiet, to get still, to drop your awareness down into your heart? You can put your hand over your heart just to bring your awareness down there and to just to feel and ask the question, what do I need to know here? What am I sensing? What am I really sensing? Because I can't tell you that answer. Rudy can't tell you that answer. No one can. But the answer is within you. And that knowledge and that learning to trust that will ensure you live an aligned, joyful, peaceful life.
We are energetic beings, and the entire world around us is energy. And that energy is giving you taptic feedback. And every area of your life is giving you feedback. I often ask my clients, your bank account, how does that make you feel? Your spouse, how do they make you feel? How do you feel about your kid? It's always how do you feel, because how we interpret the information is through our emotion. When I'm doing a breakthrough call with somebody, going deep into what is working and not working in their life so we can see the systematic pattern that's created the blueprint for how they choose to live their life, the framework, I'll ask, how do you feel? And so often they say, this isn't a feeling. And then they describe a sense. Well, it's like this or it's like that. And that is what we want. We want you today to actually pause and start to ask, what is the information around you sharing with you? What makes you feel like this isn't working? This is resistance. This is a push. This is a drag. This isn't something I want to do right now. And then what is it that I do want to be doing? And what is going to be something that is serving me versus not serving me? And I challenge you to start doing this with something really simple. Do I want to eat this or this? And what feels more expansive to you? When someone says, hey, do you want to come to my home? Or do you want to go out for dinner? Or do you want to grab drinks? What does that feel like? Does that light you up or does that feel restrictive inside of your body? And when you wake up in the mornings, how do you feel? What is the overriding feeling? If you've got anxiety, where is the anxiety? What is causing it? And then how could you refrain how you look at it? Could you shift how you feel about it? Is there something that you're missing, something that you've been ignoring, something that you've been trying to push to make work? And when you start to pay attention to the information, you will inadvertently fall into a state of flow. I hope that this information today has been thought provoking enough for you to pause, to stop, and to ask what is meant for you. And can you take a ride with us on the river? Thank you so much for joining us in the Empowered Life podcast. We freaking love you and look forward to catching you in the next episode. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. If this episode gave you clarity, peace, or a perspective shift, hold on to that. And here is how you lock it in. Subscribe so that you keep building momentum week after week. And if you're the kind of person that believes a good message should travel, please leave a review. Reviews aren't just ratings. They're signals that help this reach the people who are ready for it. And then share this episode with somebody you love, someone you lead, or somebody that you were rooting for. Links are in the show notes so that you can connect with me online and on Instagram. Now go out there and take one beautiful, bold, and aligned step and make it count. I'm going to catch you on the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast.